Hello students, welcome back to our new video on the chapter Indian economy on the eve of independence. In the last chapter, in the last video, we discussed about the level of economic development during the colonial rule. We also discussed about the impact of economic policies pursued by the colonial government on the economic development of our country. We also discussed about what kind of structural change was brought in by the policies of British government in Indian economy. We also discussed about the growth rate of GDP during the colonial rule as well as the growth of per capita income during the colonial rule. Now in this video we'll be discussing about the state of Indian agriculture during the colonial rule and we'll be looking for the possible reasons for the stagnation of agriculture sector and slow growth of it during the colonial rule. So before discussing the state of Indian agriculture on the eve of independence, let us know about some of the economists who estimated India's national per capita income during the colonial rule. Since no efforts had been made by the colonial government to estimate India's national income, some of the economists had tried to estimate the national income of India at the time of independence of India. So basically some of the notable economists who estimated India's national income and per capita income are the Findlay Shiraz was one of the economists who estimated India's national income. Dadabhai Nauroji, William Digby, V.K.R.V. Rao, R.C. Desai. These are the 5 economists who tried to estimate India's national income and per capita income during the colonial period. But among these 5 economists, it was only V.K.R.V. Rao whose estimates are considered important, whose estimates are very important, whose estimates were very significant for the further study of Indian economy. Okay, so it was Rao only. Now we'll be looking at what was the state of Indian agriculture during the colonial rule. So as we discussed in the last video as well, like the Indian economy was an agrarian economy mainly before the advent of Britishers as well as during the colonial rule also. So India was a agrarian economy also. Now if we look at the agriculture sector during pre-British India, so it is beautifully explained by a French traveler Bernier, who described 17th century Bengal in the following way. He said, "The knowledge I have acquired of Bengal in 2 visits inclines me to believe that it is richer than Egypt." So according to foreign travelers, India was richer than Egypt, and it was known for its export of different goods. India was exporting cotton and silk, rice, sugar and butter goods to different countries, and it also produces wheat, vegetables, groans, fowls, ducks and geese. It has immense herd of pigs and flocks of sheep and goats, and fish of every kind it has in profusion. So a French traveler, that Bernier, described India as a golden bird. So we were basically a self-reliant country in pre-British India. We were producing most of the goods and services domestically only, and we occasionally imported any kind of good from the foreigners. Okay, but when the Britishers came in India, basically the policies that they performed, the policies that they pursued, they implemented in India. We became an importer of finished products from the Britain only. Okay, and we also became dependent on the other countries for the food supplies. Okay, so we'll be discussing about these issues in the later videos. Now first of all we'll be discussing about the agriculture sector only. Okay, so basically this is how the French traveler Bernier described the 17th century Bengal in India. Now we'll be looking at the state of Indian agriculture on the British colonial rule. So if we talk about the productivity, now what is the meaning of productivity? Productivity is like that how much output you can produce per hectare of land. So if you are having a piece of land, then how much output that you are going to produce with that particular piece of land, that is the productivity of that land. So suppose if there is a land of 100 square meters and the output produced from that 100 square meter is 1000 kilogram of wheat, then the productivity will be 1000 kilogram per 100 square meters land. Okay, so if we talk about the productivity under the productivity of the agriculture sector during the British colonial rule, the in agriculture productivity was very low. It was very low. Okay, because India had been an agrarian economy in the in the pre-British period as well as during the colonial rule, and today as well, India, most of the population is dependent on agriculture only. So at that particular period of time, like during the British colonial rule, 85% of the country's population lived in villages, and they were deriving their source of livelihood from the agriculture sector only. Okay, they so basically they directly or indirectly were dependent on the agriculture sector for the fulfillment of their needs. And but under the British colonial rule, the agriculture sector experienced some growth due to an expansion of aggregate area under cultivation. Although there was like almost the agriculture sector during the colonial rule was stagnated, there were little sign of change in the aggregate output of the agriculture sector. But there was some kind of change, although some kinds of changes were there, but those changes were only because of the growth or in the expansion of aggregate area under cultivation. Okay, however, the overall productivity of the agriculture sector remained low. Now if we talk about the causes of what were the causes of Indian agriculture stagnation during the colonial rule? Why did the agriculture sector remain stagnant during the colonial rule? So there are a lot of reasons behind the stagnation of agriculture sector during the colonial rule. The very first reason, or we can say the main reason behind the stagnation of agriculture sector during colonial rule, was the zamindari system or various land revenue settlement systems that were prevalent during the colonial rule. So there were three kinds of revenue land settlement system were prevalent. The first system was the Ryotwari system, the second was the Zamindari system, the third was the Mahalwari system. The Ryotwari system under this it was in the state of Malabar, Coimbatore, Madras, Assam and Madurai, and later it was extended to Maharashtra in East Bengal. And basically in this system, the taxes were directly collected by the government, and it established a direct relationship between the government and the rayot. Basically the word rayot indicates the cultivator, so the government collected taxes from the cultivators itself. So there was a direct relationship between the government and the cultivators. The second system was the zamindari system, which was implemented in the states of Bihar, Bengal, Orissa, northern Kemetic and Banaras divisions. Okay, we'll be discussing about this zamindari system in detail in our later on. And the third system was the Mahalwari system. The Mahalwari system was the Mahal word indicates the the Mahal words indicate the group, or it indicates a group of people, a cluster basically. Okay, so Mahalwari system was introduced in Gangetic Valley, which includes the major parts of the northwestern frontier province, Punjab, and in central provinces. Now since the Mahal indicates the group, so basically in this the government levied taxes, the government imposed taxes collectively on the members of the community. So like if there are for 10 members in the community in a particular region, then the taxes were not imposed individually, but they will be imposed on a collective basis. Okay, so under Mahalwari system, the taxes were imposed collectively on the members of the community. Now among these three land revenue settlement system, the zamindari system was the main cause of stagnation in the agriculture sector during the colonial rule. Okay, now let us understand why zamindari system of land revenue settlement was the main cause of agricultural stagnation. Now if you look at this pyramid, at the top of this pyramid the British government is there, and at the bottom of this pyramid peasants are there. Okay, so peasants were the people who cultivated land basically, and they were the cultivators of the land. and among so British government and among between British government and the peasants, zamindars were there. So zamindars were the middlemen, the middle persons who were playing the role of middlemen. So basically, now what happened during the colonial rule under this system, because British government was British government had given some zamindaris to the zamindars. Like zamindars were the owners of the land, owners of the lands, and they were given rights to collect revenues from the peasants. So British government indirectly were collecting British government were indirectly collecting revenues from the peasants with the help of zamindar. So the main job of zamindars was to collect revenue from these peasants. So whatever the peasants were whatever output the peasants were producing, a fixed sum of money was gone to the British government, and that money was collected by zamindars. So zamindars were playing the role of middleman. Okay, so now how this system basically created a lot of problem and lot of problem for the government, lot of problem for the zamindars as well as for the peasants. Now we'll be looking at this. Now if we look at the zamindari system, among this zamindari system, under the zamindari system, whatever the profit accruing, it out of it, the agriculture sector went to the zamindars instead of the cultivators. So whatever profit the peasants were generating, all that profit go to the zamindars, and out of that profit, the major fixed proportion was paid to the British government, and whatever was left with the zamindars, they kept with themselves only. They didn't share with the farmers, they didn't share with the peasants. So whatever profit there was accruing out of the agriculture sector, all the profit went to the zamindars only instead of the cultivators. So cultivators had no incentive to improve the condition of agriculture sector during the colonial rule. Okay, now the second thing was, the main interest of zamindars was only to collect rent regardless the economic and social conditions of the peasants. So they were not concerned about the social problems faced by the peasants, the farmers. They were not bothered about economic condition of the peasants. The only interest of the zamindars was only to collect rent. Okay, and this caused immense misery and social tensions among the cultivators, because many at times the cultivators were not in a position to pay the rent because of some kind of, because you know that agriculture sector is an uncertain activity, है ना. It is quite uncertain because it depends at that particular period of time. Our irrigation system was not very developed, and because there was no other source of irrigation, we were dependent on rainfall only, है ना. So that is why it is said that agriculture is quite uncertain, and because of that uncertainty, there was a social tensions and misery among the cultivators. Now the third reason behind the stagnation of Indian agriculture was like the terms of revenue settlement that were imposed by the British government. Like since the zamindars had to pay a fixed sum of money, fixed rent to the British government, so their main interest was to collect revenue. So whatever and it was also like that dates of depositing specified sums of the revenue were fixed. So the zamindars had to pay a sum of money to the British government on a fixed date, and if they failed to pay, if they failed to do so, in that case, the zamindars had a fear of losing their rights of the land. So basically, because of losing rights of the land, they adopted such an attitude. That is why they were not concerned about the state of the cultivators and the farmers or the peasants. So that because they had this fear in their mind that if they will not be able to produce, if they will not be able to pay the rent to the British government, then their zamindaris will be taken away, and they will lose their rights on the land. So basically, that is why these term of revenue settlement also caused some kind of inefficiencies in the agriculture sector. That is why the agriculture sector remained stagnant during the colonial rule. So this was the first reason, that is the zamindari system. Now we'll be looking at the second reason. The second reason behind the although the zamindari system was responsible, it was the main cause of agricultural stagnation, there were several other reasons also. The second reason was the lack of irrigation facilities. Like, our farmers were still dependent on for the irrigation purposes on the rainfall only. So there was no other source of irrigation, and the British government the zamindars government did nothing to improve the irrigational facilities in the villages of India. So that is why because of a lack of irrigation facilities, the productivity of the agriculture sector was very low, and there was a little sign of technological advancement, because most of the farmers were very poor. Although some of the farmers have adopted new kinds of technology, but because most of the farmers were poor and they were not having resources to buy new technologies, so they did not upgrade. So that is why the agriculture sector remained stagnated, because of the low productivity. The third reason was the commercialization of agriculture. Now, what is commercialization of agriculture? Basically, the commercialization of agriculture refers to change in cropping pattern. When there is a change in cropping pattern, when farmers start to produce cash crops instead of growing food crops. Now, what are cash crops? Cash crops are commercial crops, that is the crops which are sold in the market. So like jute, indigo, these were the cash crops during colonial rule, and the prices of because farmers can sell these crops, sell these crops in the market, so that is why they were producing. The farmers were forced to produce these cash crops by the Britishers in the British era. Now, so basically commercialization of agriculture refers to change in cropping pattern from food crops to the commercial crops or cash crops. Now, commercial crops like that are grown for the commercial purposes, for the resale purposes, sale purposes. Okay, so these are the crops, these are the cash crops. Now, what happened during the colonial rule? The commercialization of agriculture acquired a different meaning. Now, what happened? What happened now? The Britishers started offering a higher price for the cash crops. Like, they were started giving higher prices for the production of, for the cultivation of indigo, for the cultivation of jute. Now, because farmers had an incentive for growing cash crops, because they were getting more prices for the cash crop rather than the food crops. So they were producing more cash crops rather than food crops. Now, what happened? Because there was an increase in the production of cash crops, this increase in the production of cash crop was at the cost of the food production. So that is why the food production had gone down during the colonial rule, because most of the farmers started producing cash crops, and because of the rise in the cash crops, the prices of food grains rises, because there was scarcity of food grains now, because we were producing more cash crops and lesser amount of food grains. So that is why the prices of food grains in the domestic market started rising. And there were some evidences of a relatively high rate of cash crops in certain areas of the country due to commercialization of agriculture. So there we say that some sign of change in agriculture sector was there, and it was because of commercialization of agriculture and increase in the production of cash crop only. Okay, but this increase in yield of cash crop could hardly help farmer in improving their economic condition, because instead of producing food crops, now they were producing cash crops, which were to be ultimately used by the Britishers back home, because these cash crops like indigo was being used by the Britishers in their industries only. Indigo was a particular raw material in their industries. It was used for dyeing purposes, like they were producing clothes, and clothes were being dyed with the help of this indigo. And because this indigo was of very good quality and it was very famous in the international market as well, so that is why they started forcing our farmers, forcing cultivators to produce more indigo as compared, and that is why the farmers started producing indigos and other cash crops at the cost of the production of food grains. Now the fourth reason behind the stagnation of agriculture sector was the lack of resources. So although despite some progress was made by the Britishers in the area of irrigation, Indian agriculture sector starved of investment in terracing, flood control, drainage, and desalination of soil. Desalination is like if we are continuously using more water. If we are continuously using more of water on a particular field, then the amount of salt in that particular field will increase, and this is known as salinization of soil. And since excessive use of water led to the salinization of soil, that particular soil was not fit for the growth of the crops. Okay, so no efforts were made by the Britishers to desalinize the soil, and the maintenance of proper drainage system, the flood control system, the terracing of the no investment was made in terracing, etc. While a small farmers changed their cropping pattern from food crops to the commercial crops, like they because of the commercialization of agriculture, although some farmers started growing food cash crops instead of growing food crops, the small farmers, a large section of tenants, small farmers and sharecroppers, neither had any resources and technology nor had any incentive to invest in agriculture, because there was no sufficient amount of resources. No resources were there. That particular large section of tenant and small and farmers and sharecroppers, the agriculture sector remained stagnated because of this, because since they were lacking resources, so they were not able to use the updated technologies. Okay, now the fifth reason was the partition of in Pakistan. Like before 1947, Pakistan and India, the Pakistan was a part of India, but after partition, Pakistan got separated from India. Now this separation had an inverse effect on the agriculture sector of the India. How? Let us look at. If you like there is a If you are able to see the map of India before and after partition, in before partition map, the East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, was a part of British India. Okay, and this East Pakistan region was very fertile for the production of jute, for the cultivation of jute. But what happened after partition? After partition in 1947, this East Pakistan region went to the Pakistan. Okay, and since this was a very fertile land, this was a very fertile land, and this was very suitable for the growth of jute also. So that is why the jute production in India went down because of the partition of India and Pakistan. Okay, so because a sizable portion of the undivided country's highly irrigated and fertile land went to the Pakistan, it negatively affected the agricultural production. The whole of the jute producing area became part of the East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh. And because of this, India's jute industry suffered heavily for lack of raw materials, because most of the jute industries were located in that Bengal region only, because the soil was very the soil was very fit for the growth of jute. So that is why jute was easily available in those areas, and since this jute was used as a raw material in jute industries, so in jute industries. But after the partition of India and Pakistan, a sizable portion of land like the West Bengal region, the eastern Pakistan region went to the Pakistan, and that is why there was a shortage of raw material for the Indian jute industries, and they suffered heavily for lack of raw materials. And that is why the agriculture sector also got negatively hampered due to the colonial rule, due to the policies of colonial rule, due to the partition of India and Pakistan.